Good morning, everyone. We welcome you to the first meeting of 2020 for the Board of Trustees for the Utah Transit Authority. It's Wednesday, January the 15th. We invite you to stand now and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll begin our meeting off with our Safety First Minute, and I just have to tell you, Sheldon, that your admonitions during December caused me after Christmas to clean my garage and take out all the tripping hazards. And anyway, it was just close to a miracle, so thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
One place is safer.
Thanks, Chair. Trustees, appreciate the opportunity to give the safety message as always. Here's a safety poster for this month. Safety is as simple as ABC, always be careful. I want to highlight the example of where I saw yesterday. Jeff is our facilities journeyist here for FLHQ, and he's probably helped each of you out with some project along the way. Yesterday afternoon, we had a snow event. And what I saw was Jeff went out there with a hand shovel, and he made sure we had a walkway that went from the west side exit and the north side exit all the way over to the crossing. He shoveled it by hand, and then he was going back and forth with ice melt to make sure their employees yesterday afternoon could make it over to the train to go home. And so we have folks just like Jeff at all our facilities doing a great job. Eddie's leadership obviously is part of that. So hats off to our facilities folks. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks to our facilities folks. It is extremely important. We'll go next to public comments. Bob, any?
No public comment today.
Okay. That brings us to our consent agenda, which includes approval of our minutes from December 18th.
I move approval of the minutes of December 18 board meeting.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. That next brings us to our agency report. And good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning. So today I just want to give a little update on the AV, the Autonomous Vehicle Shuttle pilot. We're going to do a 6-month update. Sharon Robertson's here to give that. I'm just going to give you just a little bit of a briefing, and then intro, and Sharon will begin it. But the pilot began testing in April 2019, and it's scheduled to run through May 2020. The partners, with UDOT, are fully testing. Are testing a fully electric Society of Automotive Engineers Level 4 12-passenger AV, that's a lot to say, as a first and last mile solution connecting to other transit services and as a circulator service. UTA and UDOT have identified 9 test sites which will meet all the applicable AV laws and criteria for the operations. The routes to date have been approximately 1 to 2 miles long. The project team conducts surveys at each of the sites, and the service has been free to the public. So I just want to have Jaron just give a little bit of an update on where we are on the 6 months to date.
Great, thank you, and good morning, trustees. This has been an exciting project, as I think everybody's had the opportunity to go out there and ride and experience this shuttle. It's been a good partnership with UDOT and our partner Easy Mile as well, as we've tested this out over the last 6 months. We successfully have deployed this at 7 sites now. Some with longer time frames than others, and again with certain project objectives, whether that's a first and last mile connection to our transit system, whether it's a community circulator just to move people around a certain area, or whether that's just to engage the public. From our perspective, again, those are really important criteria and opportunities for us to go out and see how these technologies can help us improve efficiencies when it comes to operations, improve access to people with disabilities. And then really from UDOT's perspective this is really one of the critical paths to their goal of 0 fatalities. And so they see that as connected autonomous vehicles will really help them get there as we continue to test and learn from these technologies. And we've had a lot of success so far. One of the other factors of this project is we've gone out and looked at AAA studies, and there's a large percentage of the population who don't necessarily trust these technologies. But we also know about that. What's that? I wonder why. Well, on top of that, what we see is the same people who don't trust it haven't had the experience with it too. So part of this is really letting people go out there and experience for themselves and get the chance to see what it's like to ride on a vehicle like this. As part of this is a level 4 autonomous vehicle. As you know, we don't have a steering wheel on there. We don't have a seat for a driver, but we do have an individual on there at all times for safety purposes, and then really to engage the public. So there is a level of probably that support when they see somebody on there, and they get that experience. So as mentioned, we've tested this at the UDOT test track. We took this up to Park City and tested it at the Canyons Resort, at a entertainment complex at Station Park. We tested out at the state offices here on North Temple in Salt Lake City. We've been up to the University of Utah. We did a day at the state capitol. And then most recently, we've just been out at the Mountain America Exposition Center, just really giving the public the opportunity to use that. So throughout the rest of our pilot project, we will continue to operate at Mountain America Exposition Center. We will take it down to St. George for their Transportation Expo. We'll return to the state capitol as part of Transit Day on the Hill. And then we are going to go back up to the University of Utah to do additional deployment there, and hopefully Thanksgiving Point. So we still have quite a bit planned throughout the remainder of the project, but wanted to give you that quick update. Let's see, move on. Some quick metrics just for you. We've carried over 4,000 riders to this point, 46 days in service. We see on average about 5 to 6 hours per day that we're operating, which gives 14 hours riders per hour. And then we're operating about 98% of the time in autonomous mode. So the other 2% means something's occurred and we have to go into manual operations as part of the service. As part of this too, as we talked about how the public feels about autonomous vehicles, we're really trying to engage the public. So we're conducting surveys at each site and getting that rider feedback, and we're getting a large percentage of acceptance and people feeling safe when riding this technology. Just moving on quickly, talking about some of our successes and challenges, because we believe we've made a lot of progress with what we've learned so far. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to continue with this project in the future. So when it comes to research and development, we are working with the University of Utah to continue to evaluate the human psychology and trust of these systems. So they're helping us conduct studies to better understand that perspective. We're working on the connected component of this vehicle, so it's how the vehicle can interact with traffic signals and other vehicle infrastructure systems. And again, going back to that surveys, approximately 85% of our respondents have a really positive attitude, and they feel safe when riding the system. So we're excited about that. And then we see on average, we've just done on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you rate this service? We see 4.7 out of 5 on that scale. In addition, we've seen over 40 deployments of the ramp. So some of those are for just demonstration, but we have gone out and really worked with the disabled community and allowed them to try and test these technologies to get their rider input and feedback as well. So a lot of acceptance and value add from doing that as well. Some of our challenges real quick is we are operating relatively low speeds. We're probably seeing just under 3 miles per hour on average. So obviously that's a challenge today, and we believe we have opportunities to work through that and the technology, continue to improve, and where we can increase operational speeds. We do have another challenge, has just been our inability to move around obstacles. So we go and we predetermine a course and set up those routes. And so when something is in the way of the vehicle, we have to manually move the vehicle around that. And that's why you're seeing some of those disengagements in that 98% of the time autonomous mode. So again, advancements in the technology and the software itself will allow us to continue to make improvements. So the vehicle will be able to make those decisions. And that will incorporate additional hardware and technologies that will improve overall operations to help us make those decisions. So some of our opportunities really as we continue this project is really to increase our speeds, and advance the ADA operations and really help people with disabilities, and really advance our public-private partnership with this. So as we look at our key takeaways, some of the better opportunities are to put this in its own dedicated corridor for the short term as we continue operations. we ran into a mechanical failure at the University of Utah, I think most of you know, and the vehicle doesn't return to the garage every day. So some of those takeaways are, this is a very different operating model. We have to leave the vehicle on site, it needs to be stored there, and it has to be charged there. And so when there's a maintenance issue, we have to go pick that vehicle up and return it to a site where we can do that repair work. So, we're getting that experience and seeing how this is different from how we run operations today. So it's been very value add, and there's a lot of opportunity. So really is when I talk about this is we continue this pilot. We as an agency have got a lot of experience and we're ahead of the game, and we have a lot of opportunity to continue to advance these technologies and really see how they really fit into the transportation system. So as we do that, we have applied for funding through the FTA to go through a phase 2 pilot. And as part of that pilot, what we do is implement a 1-year fixed route service that's a full integration into the transportation system. So it would operate on one dedicated corridor during that time frame as a UTA route and be available to the public and really get that operational experience of saying, how does this really fit into the system when we're treating it as a fixed route service? And so I believe that is a really critical and really important for us to take our learnings and advance them to the next phase. We've got UDOT support on that project. We have Salt Lake City support on that project. We have our vendors continue support. And there's a lot of excitement. So we're really, we've put that application in last year, and we've just been waiting on that to help us continue to fund the next phase of this pilot. That will allow us also continue all those first phase objectives of learning getting that operational experience, learning about the safety, improving the technology, and then fitting into to our system, see, is this really a viable solution? As part of that project too, as we do have an onboard person on there, we would look to go through a series of testing and ensure we've met certain requirement and safety aspects to where we could actually gradually remove that onboard attendant from the vehicle and do remote operations. This is really the future and the key to us to learn more and say, is this a valuable solution? So that would be a big objective there. So I know I've talked a lot. I have just one last point I want to bring up, then I could answer any questions. As part of this, UTA is among just a handful of transit agencies testing this technology. And so we've joined a cohort of several other either DOTs or transit agencies across the country who have interest or who are testing these technologies. And we've come together and say, how can we best come together to develop the right criteria for a transit agency to ask the industry to bring these solutions to us, so that as today we're going out there and saying we're using what the industry has, but we want to say this is what we need as a transportation agency if we're going to operate those vehicles. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware that we're actively engaged in the future of these vehicles and ensuring that they meet our needs. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop. And
Jaron, how often, are you fundamentally working with the same software that they started the pilot with, or are they sort of frequently updating and adding in fixes and those kind of things? I'm just trying to get a feel of how dynamically they're trying to adjust that.
So a couple of things, yes. So I believe we're either in the process or have just had our actually first software update.
Okay.
One of those challenges we see is with the LiDAR system and the sensitivity of that. And so when it recognizes an object, no matter what it may be, it is making a decision to stop for it. And some of those objects may not be obstacles that the vehicle needs to stop for. So through our testing, the vehicle is self-learning, and through other programs across the state or the country too, to where it's getting that experience and able to make intelligent decisions and help with those updates. So that software will help us reduce the sensitivity of the LiDAR as well.
Great. Any other questions? Beth?
Thank you. Thank you, Jaron. Thank you, Jaron, for that presentation. I think that it has been, it's been fascinating. I get a lot of people still asking me questions. It was unfortunate about the mechanical challenges on the one day, but overall, I think people are pretty. And I did have a couple of just comments I wanted to make. Number one, thank you for this, and thank you for the transit day. So we had a transit day last week for our other partners in transit throughout the state, and you did a presentation on this. And I think that this was probably one of the most popular presentations that we had. So I think people get really excited and they want to see how this can work. I was wondering if you still have some more phases that you're going to be going through. You mentioned Thanksgiving Point and a couple of other locations. Could you give us some notice as to when those are going to be occurring so that we can maybe get those out to our partners in those particular areas so they can get an opportunity to see that? And then I just had another question in terms of doing the fixed route portion of that. Do you have that? Is that part of the application process, or have you yet to determine where that would go? Should you get the grant?
Yeah, so first of all, yes, we can get you the dates. We've planned for the remaining deployments. We have, I apologize, I just don't have them with me. Regarding the site for the phase 2, we've partnered with Salt Lake City, and they've committed to contribute some funding as part of that partnership. So first and foremost, we said the site should be in Salt Lake City as part of that. Now, obviously, throughout this whole process of developing or identifying and developing a site, there are many aspects that need to be accomplished. And so there's been a lot of criteria that we had to go through and do some research and make sure we've met that criteria to make sure the site works from a safety and operational perspective. But on top of that, we had to get approval from NHTSA to operate. So we had to ensure we met all that criteria. So while we are pushing for Salt Lake City as they're our partner on phase 2, there's no guarantees we can find that site. But we will start partnering with both Salt Lake City, UDOT, Easy Mile, to start that initial site development sooner than later, even prior to knowing if we receive the funding or not, because it's a long, drawn-out process, and we want to be very proactive so that should we see we get the funding, we're ahead of the game to continue operations. So we really have got some very rough ideas, but we really need to go through a process. And again, we're looking for Salt Lake City first. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Just an observation. I can see why people feel like they're quite safe at 3 miles an hour.
Yes.
I'll be really interested to see how people react when they're going 40, 50, 70 miles an hour in a car without a driver. And that'll be an interesting observation. And we can test that against the 3 mile an hour responses.
Absolutely. I mean, it is slow. And just to be clear, that's on average we've operated. We have gotten it up to 11 miles per hour, and we've gotten a little slower at 9 miles per hour. But overall, on the average, it's quite slow.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Good. Carolyn, anything in addition?
No, that concludes my report.
Okay, excellent.
Sharon.
Thank you both. That brings us to item number 7, which are resolutions. The first one being a resolution authorizing execution of modification number 1 to a federal aid grant agreement with the Utah Department of Transportation to provide funding for the Springville Sharp-Tintic Railroad Connection Project. Mary?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So so last year, we signed a federal aid agreement with UDOT for $5.6 million project budget to complete the Sharp-Tintic project. And then with that, there was a required $321,000 local match. So we entered into a cooperative agreement with Spanish Fork and Springville City for us to three-way have a split of $107,000 each for that local match. Since that time, we were able to identify additional federal funds for the project. And so now we want to enter another agreement with UDOT, update that federal aid agreement. That requires additional local match, but back in March, this had already been identified. So back in, last May, we updated our cooperative agreement with our local partners. So we each now are paying $117,000 towards that local match. So this is it took a while to get the federal aid agreement because there was potential rescission of those federal funds, and so we had to wait. But now that rescission has gone away, and so these federal funds are available. And UDOT has actually thrown in another, I think, $120,000. So now the total project budget would be $6.3 million. The local match, as I explained, has already been identified. So we just want to execute this federal aid agreement so we can move forward with the project.
And Mary, if I'm reading the memo correctly, that our portion is just in kind, our,
Correct.
Staff time, right?
Correct.
Could you tell us specifically what the Sharp Tintic project consists of?
Yeah,
Not
sorry, I didn't
every-
bring any visuals this time.
Not everybody may understand that, being from Utah County. I've been involved in some of those discussions, but could you just briefly tell us what that is?
Yeah,
It's
so
all
we own part of one of the lines down a little past Provo that our front runner is running on right now. And then we own, I might get these backwards, then we own the Tintic line all the way down to Payson. But there's no connection between those two. So when we eventually want to extend all the way to Payson, we have to make that connection. So this funding is to make that connection between those two lines. And Springville City is actually the one who had applied for those funds because they see it as an opportunity to close some of those grade to remove some of those grade crossings that are there now. And so this is a benefit for the communities as well as for UTA.
any other questions on this item? Seeing none, I ask for a motion.
I'll move that we approve Resolution 2020-01-01 and all the verbiage to provide funding for the Springville Sharp Tintic Railroad project.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second on the resolution. I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Millington,
Aye.
Trustee Holbrook,
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to the second resolution authorizing issuance of a notice to proceed under a contract manager, general contractor contract for Tiger, first last mile connection program for projects for 2020. And I think we have
So-
something similar.
Yes, and so I've asked Heather Benning, she's a project manager, to join me in case you have any specific project questions. But yes, so last year, as you mentioned, we had a resolution that authorized the executive director to execute any of the anticipated project contracts that were on a list for 2019. And this year, we want to do something similar for 2020. We have identified 11, correct? 11 projects that we foresee being ready to be executed this coming year. And they're identified on the table attached to the resolution. And this would just give us that authority, Carolyn, the authority to execute those contracts as they come up and are ready to be executed.
Now, this is part of that overall Tiger grant of some $20 million or whatever it was.
Correct, sorry, I didn't mention that. Yes, this is part of the Tiger
And this is
program
the
of
ongoing,
projects.
this is the 2020 piece of that overall several-year project.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And I think we had 12 executed in 2019, and we anticipate 11 going forward this year.
What's the total dollar amount for 2020?
I think that's anticipated for the contractor of $7 worth of contracts to be executed.
Thank you.
I thank you, Mary, for bringing this out again. I think that this is a great opportunity to get all of these things done in these local communities. And I was like, so I'm just looking at the contract and the list of communities that are going to be impacted in the 2020 timeframe. And I'm wondering if we, I just really am trying to figure out a way that we can get this information out to not only those communities, but what we're doing in general, because I think that this is really a valuable thing. People don't often look at infrastructure. I know I'm a geek about this stuff. And I think this infrastructure investment is just really critical, but yet it's not very noticed. And so I was like, we're going to do Mill Creek sidewalks, West Jordan railroad crossings, Lehigh overhead head bridge. There's a couple of head bridges in there. And I just was wondering if you wanted to maybe indicate all of those, or we can work out something that can communicate that information out. So.
Yeah, I think Heather would be happy to come and just maybe do a slideshow presentation of all the projects that we're doing, because there are a lot of great projects that have already been completed and are in the process. And
Yeah, I would really like that, and I think that that is just a real valuable thing for us moving forward.
I think it's also valuable to, I'm not gonna say publicize it, put it out there, what's being done. I don't think a
Right.
lot of people understand, and also how we've leveraged these funds, the Tiger Grant with local matches and other funding, to be able to stretch this $20 million out to deliver a whole number of projects. I think that's really important. So I can work with the communications team to try to get something out, maybe explicitly talk to some of these communities and get it promoted so people understand sort of just, this whole program of projects that we're able to do.
I would love that. I think that'd be great.
And Heather, why don't you just maybe mention how many have been completed and some of the types of projects that we've done?
Yeah, so in the grant, there's about 160 projects, and we've completed about half of those. Some of them have been smaller projects like ADA ramps, but as you mentioned, we're going to start some of the bigger projects this year, like the Lehigh Ped Bridge. That's going to be the biggest one. Also Folsom Trail, but we've done many bike lanes, sidewalk projects, things like that. So all over the place. So
Well, one of the things about the Lehigh Ped Bridge, that's the big one,
yeah,
but that is a connection between the trail that goes through Utah County and the trail that eventually will connect up to Salt Lake County, so that people on bikes or runners or whatever can start at Great Salt Lake and wind up at Bridalveil Falls in Provo Canyon. So I think, that Ped Bridge is a vital link right there to that whole trail system. And those are the kinds of things that I think we can get some mileage out of if we promote them on how we're contributing to the welfare of our entire state because of that very vital connection over SR 92 right there in Lehigh.
Also, the other head bridges that are coming up as well. There's two others on this list, and I love that idea, and I think that it would be really valuable for our communities. So thank you.
The one thing, and maybe this happens based on jurisdiction, and I almost hesitate to even mention it because it was a mixed blessing. During my city council years, they'd have a sign that says, this is the project, and I'm not suggesting this part, but they'd list your names, which was great if it was building a park. It was horrible if they were digging a sewer, 35 feet down, and it was disrupted for 9 months or something like that. But because you got to own both experiences, but it was also, it just helped those that lived around there know what the sort of the goal was. And each of these projects had a goal as part of that. And I just find when the public sort of understands why you're doing the project, then it actually makes them appreciate, or if they have an actual question about
right, yeah.
who to call. So does any of that happen? And
We haven't done.
I realize the kind of
signage.
ADA ramp, you
Yeah,
would
but
get into that.
for each of the projects, we do like send out flyers and things like that. Usually the city is posting the information on their website. So we'll create like a project specific construction flyer, letting people know about the impacts and what the project is and the partnership and the funding. But usually it's on like the city's website and it's distributed to the people
Local.
who are, like
Impacted.
affected right by the project. Yeah.
And I would work with our communications.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we used to have the project and then not brought to you by, but there was some other phrases
Yeah.
that was brought to you by.
And that would make
Salt
sense
Lake
for the
City,
larger
the federal
projects, yeah.
FHWA, whatever, and you can create the signs right around the project area that you put up, right? So we could take a look at that.
Okay. Any other questions on this particular aspect? The only other question I had is the UTA local portion. I assume that's in our capital budget.
Yes, it's all within the budget. And if the project budget increases over what we had anticipated, our partners are the ones who pay that
Responsible
additional.
for it.
Yes.
Yeah, but most of the projects that have the UTA local funding
Or our project.
are our
right?
projects, yeah.
That's
And
what
we've
I-
been working with GJ's group to kind of go through those projects and making maybe slight changes based on the updated like wayfinding design and things like that. So we may group those a little bit differently than they're shown here, but
Okay,
we're working on that, so.
great. If there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion on this resolution.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize the issuance of the notice to proceed for R 2020-01-02 for the Tiger First and Last Mile Connection Program for 2020.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Holbrook.
Aye.
Trustee Millington.
Aye.
Chair Christensen. It's unanimous. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good luck this year. Next brings us to contracts, disbursements, and grants. And the first item up is a contract with Green Bike on our sponsorship agreement with them. And Nicole, it has your name off to the side. Is that?
That means it's me.
Come on forward if you would. And I know we've had a long relationship with Green Bike. I think we're part of the originating group. Tell us what this agreement does.
Yes, good morning. Yes, we are one of the founding partners of Green Bike back in 2012. I think the executive director, Ben Bolte, came and spoke to you all a few months ago, just kind of gave a discussion item of where their organization is and where they're going in the future. Today I'm here to talk about a sponsorship agreement that's a 5-year agreement that amounts to $375,000 from 2019 to 2023, I believe. It is a sponsorship that looks at 3 of our stations, locations. So it would be Salt Lake Central Station, which is right over here where they have a Green Bike, the North Temple Frontrunner Station just down the street, and then, of course, right in front of our station here, headquarters. Those stations are valued at about $25,000 in this agreement. And for that, Green Bike would be giving us annual passes. They would give every one of our employees about $2,700 for 2020 is what we're looking at. Annual passes to all of their Green Bikes valued at, we'd all pay $1. They're generally valued, I think, at $35 per piece, and then a family member or a partner at that same cost. They'd also give us a 24-hour pass, which means you could keep it at your home for a penny. And that's up to 1,000 of those that we could distribute throughout or do as a promotional piece. We'd also do additional promotions for 200 passes that we could do for social media or any kind of promotions that we would do in communications or, giveaways or things like that. In addition, we do some partnerships throughout the year with Green Bike. We've done one last year we did with Lyft, Green Bike in Salt Lake City, where we put it on our passes. So if you had a Hive Pass, you now have a Green Bike as well. So you have a Hive Pass and a Green Bike, and it's all inclusive of one thing. So we're always looking at those partnerships for first and last mile and then tie it into our system. So those are kind of the connectivity pieces we would do. So that's what I'm presenting today. One of the things I would like to kind of point out to you is this wouldn't prevent Green Bike from doing other agreements with UTA, maybe real estate. They have a pass program with us that they'll come back and renew through Monica's group. That's probably needing to be renewed as well. But this is just the sponsorship piece that I'm coming to present to you today. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Do we
Yes,
have
sir.
any kind of report back on
I
the
did miss that.
usage?
Yes, so we do. So as part of the agreement, we've asked for our usage annually, what our connectivity for our employees are, and the data of the data of our usage for our stations. Right now, we have a preliminary one that DJ was just sent. Some of the anecdotal, and I didn't get the breakdown, but our central station is the 5th used station out of 47. We also, out of the top 5 UTA sponsored stops are where they stop and end. So we'll be getting that data, and it's been given to planning to use as far as the first and last connection. So that will be part of the agreement as well, as to get that data annually.
Excuse me, other questions? If there are none, I would entertain a motion on this contract.
I move that we approve the Green Bike sponsorship agreement as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you for your work on
Thank you.
getting this agreement done. Next up is a contract for operator uniforms with Skaggs Companies. And Eddie, apparently we order a few uniforms.
We do order a few uniforms, without a doubt. So this is a 5-year contract with Skaggs Company Incorporated for operator uniforms and associated accessories. Skaggs has been our supplier for operator uniforms in the past. Our previous contract was for 5 years and it expired on December 31st, 2019. This contract amount is $360,000 a year, which would bring the 5-year contract amount to $1.8 million. The supplier will be paid by operator P-Card, which is already funded in our operating budget. Contract includes shirts, pants, jackets, socks, belts, patches, sunglasses, and any other item the uniform committee approves for use. Any questions on this contract?
Eddie, what determines like what an employee is entitled to? I mean, is it just when their uniform wears out, they get?
So they're given $270 a year. That's put onto their P card, and then they can go and replace theirs. So it kind of just maintains their uniform in a state of good repair, so to speak.
So it's part of the bargaining
Yes.
agreement, is that?
Yes.
And then if they just they tear it and they've spent their $270, it's just on them to go purchase it, whatever our price is, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think most everybody maintains and understands what they can do with their $270. And so that hasn't come across my desk with that being an issue in the past.
Okay. Other questions on this? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on this contract.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the 5-year contract with Skaggs Company Incorporated for operator uniforms.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Eddie. The next one up is a revenue contract for a paratransit vehicle lease and service agreement with the Work Activity Center.
Right. So as mentioned, this is a revenue contract, the Work Activity Center, for the lease of 9 paratransit vehicles. Contract amount is $135,000 annually, which would bring the 5-year total to $675,000. Work Activity Center is a nonprofit organization. They provide many services to the disabled community, including transportation. Under this agreement, UTA would lease fully depreciated paratransit vehicles to the center to help enhance transportation for the disabled individuals. As outlined in the contract, the Work Activity Center would provide drivers and insurance, and UTA would be responsible for maintenance and fuel. Any questions on this contract?
Remind me where the Work Activity Center is located.
So there's several of them in the area. The ones that are local, one that comes to mind is in West Valley.
Okay.
But there's several of them throughout the state. But the important thing to note here, and as you know, in regards to our agreement, is that they would only operate in our service district, of course. So they have one. I think it's in Cedar City or St. George area. Obviously, our vehicles wouldn't be used in that area. What was that?
Yeah, that is not covered.
That is not covered.
Okay.
Right. It's only in our service area.
Now, there's a variety of disabilities that they service. Do they specify to us the kind of paratransit vehicles that they're in need of? Or is it just any that we have?
No, so what we're leasing are the full paratransit style
Okay.
cutaway vans, not
Okay.
normal vans. Obviously, there's a need for the lifts and things like that on a regular basis. So that's the vehicle that works best for them.
All right. Okay, thank you.
And so right now they have 2012 buses. We have new buses coming in. So as soon as that happens, we'll lease them our 2013. And so it's really just about, kind of cycling through on vehicles. making sure that they have good assets.
Do we get the 2012 then back then?
We do. We get the 2012s back and we'll dispose of them.
Dispose of those, okay.
Yeah, whether they're donated or disposed of. Yeah.
Right.
That was my next question, is to ask if there was a donation format of some kind for those ones that are going to be then returning, the 2012s.
Yeah, we do have a program so that it comes back and people can, and Bob can speak to that. That program's kind of housed in his area, but there's an opportunity for agencies that are out there to request a vehicle, a donated vehicle, and there's a process to go through to make sure that everything is, fair and square.
Yeah, we have a current corporate policy on donating vehicles after they've reached the end of their useful life for us. We'll be bringing a UTA policy to you very soon that talks about this area.
I had one other quick question, and that is, when you, because UTA is required to do the maintenance on these vehicles, do you find that this spot of their lifespan is relatively routine, or is there a lot of maintenance on?
No, it's
on them?
relatively routine. I mean, this is only 9 vehicles, and with the number of vehicles we have, obviously we're going to pick the best ones, right? So when you say you're replacing 30 vehicles, and you know that you need to keep 9 of them that we're going to lease out and continue to run, you're really looking at the maintenance history, making sure that you're picking the best assets. So you're probably looking at it and going, well, this engine was replaced, 60,000 miles ago, so we probably ought to keep this one. And so, yeah, we're managing that from a fleet perspective.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. I did have one that's just ancillary to this contract, but when you get to the end of it, sort of our depreciated life, are our vehicles still have a lot of use to them, or they really they're not worth it for sort of day to day?
Right. So I will tell you, I especially with the paratransit vehicles, I will tell you, I learned this lesson kind of the hard way. When I was up in Ogden, my previous job, I had this idea of being able to run these on some of our lower ridership routes, and I was looking at it more of a cost-saving initiative because, they get, 10, 11 miles a gallon, it's much better than 4 or 5 that you get in a 40-foot bus, and I thought it could handle the loads. And so we actually pulled vehicles out of the boneyard and put them back into service. And at first it was really good, but after about 6 months, the cost of the maintenance started to outweigh the fuel savings. And so I really started to change my mind on, how long one of these vehicles would last. And so they really are that 5 to 6 year asset, and just the assemblies they're on, the kind of powertrains they have and things like that, and the heavy use that they get, lots of idling, and just the way they're used. Those vehicles are pretty much worn out after what we consider their lifespan.
If there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion on this revenue.
I move that we approve the revenue contract with the Work Activity Center for the paratransit vehicle leases and service.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thanks,
Thank you.
Eddie. And next up is pre-procurement. And Todd, before the meeting, you didn't wheel yourself in here, so looks like a positive sign.
Yeah, I have ditched the wheels finally, so
That's good. Well, congratulations.
moving around a little bit.
This must be a one-day thing, because I think I saw you wheeling yourself to the train station yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, I actually still use it to go to and from the train station because that's
Okay.
quite a long walk. It would take me probably about 15 minutes to get there. So, so we just have one procurement to bring to you this morning. This is a procurement for the purchase and installation of a paint booth at the Warm Springs facility, as well as upgrades to the shop if needed. The paint booth will service commuter rail equipment, including all rail cars and locomotives. The need for a paint booth at Warm Springs is essential to the state of good repair and accident repair for the heavy rail fleet. Funding for the project is included in the 2020 budget. This will be a best value procurement, and contractor selection will be based on technical criteria in addition to price. And I've asked Brian Brooks, he's the assistant maintenance manager at Warm Springs, to join me to answer any additional questions you might have.
If I remember right, this is kind of the area where Stadler Rail was leasing from us, right?
That's correct. Yeah, the farthest
And
to the east.
so it's not really something we've had the luxury of previously, at least not in a,
On the last few years.
yeah. Okay. Any questions on this?
Yeah, what's the usage that's anticipated once you get that paint booth in place? How often will you have a car in there to be repainted, or the engine, or whatever? What's the anticipated use of this facility?
I anticipate it to be fully used. We have a lot of, with the concerts being in service for 12 years, we have a lot of back work that we need to catch up on. So as we get one car done, the next one will be ready to go in. We're also looking at using it for creating fabrication parts as far as the fiberglass and different things like that for the front ends of the cars. And so looking at building some parts as well.
How long does it take to repaint an engine, a locomotive?
I'm not sure because we haven't been able to do a complete car at this time. Right now, we're stuck at a 9 square inch that we can paint at one time without a paint booth. So we have to section off cars. So it's
Okay.
a lot more time consuming right now.
All right, thank you.
So then by that definition, it would actually, you don't have to do all of that sectioning and that the taping off and everything else. So this would be a pretty smooth, straightforward process in terms of painting it.
Yes, once we get the paint booth and we put the equipment in there, we can paint the entire vehicle as far as the time wise goes. Some of it might take hours to do, and there might be a break where we'd section off, but we could paint an entire vehicle at once.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sounds like a very needed addition, so good luck in the
Well,
procurement.
what's your timetable for maybe getting bids back and maybe even having the paint booth in place?
So we're ready to go out for bid immediately, and as soon as we can get bids back and make that selection, construction would start as soon as available. So we're anticipating probably March, April timeframe to start construction, and timeframe will be based on how quickly the construction companies can complete that. But I believe sometime in the summer is the anticipated dates.
Good, I look forward to coming out and seeing.
Yeah, we want to see a tour of the
a locomotive being painted. I mean,
Yes, so do
it'll be
we.
fun.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll go next to our service and fare approvals. And first item up is a long-awaited agreement with the state of Utah for complimentary. Oh, wait, I guess go ahead. I'm sorry. Come on. Yeah, come on
We'll
forward.
take them out of order just a little bit
Yeah, let's do that. Sorry, I
to accommodate
realized
our
in
special
reading that I
guests. No
got
worries.
number A before number B. And B is the one we're long awaited and excited for.
Yes, B is the
On
one.
trip reduction, and this was a action by last year's legislative session, we welcome Representative Briscoe, who we know and has worked very closely on this and taking the lead in this way, as well as our colleague Beth Holbrook has done a lot of legwork along with Monica's team. So.
Yes, so we also have Mark Berger. He's here for the air quality air quality policy section manager. Andrea with UTA also in the audience. We have Glade. He's with the Department of Air Quality, Jessica and Grace. So thank you all for coming out. We are excited about this contract. Partnering on this pilot will be UCARE, Hill, Utah, the Utah State Legislature, and the Division of Air Quality. So to give you a little bit of background, and anybody up here can feel free to jump in. So House Bill 353, the reduction of single occupancy vehicle trips pilot program, provides free fares for the public during select bad air days. Free fare, it's an incentive to get more cars off of the road to reduce pollution and improve air quality. So we're entering into a contract with the Utah Department of Environmental Quality, Division of Air Quality, and I'll just say DAQ for short, because they are going to fund the free fare days with money appropriated from this House bill. So the contract provides up to 7 free fare days on designated days, and this will cover a 25-month period from January, starting now until We figure as late as February 2022, and the maximum of total 7 days will be spread among that period. We will work with our partners to communicate the free fare days when they are announced, and we'll do that through promotional announcements and social media. And the maximum amount of funding available for reimbursement from the division to UTA as part of this contract is $492,000. And funding received will only be used to cover foregone fare revenue. So if there's additional administrative costs involved or operating costs, those will be absorbed by UTA. So with your approval, we would like to move forward with this contract. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them as well.
Go ahead, Beth, and then I thought we should hear from Representative Briscoe.
That was what I was going to actually, maybe you could give us some background, Representative, and tell us how this all started and what we're looking for.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. It's a great time to come to my first ever UTA board meeting. I read similar legislation 7 years ago, and it was quite expansive. It was give everyone UTA fares in January and July for the ozone issue, but it was quite a bit of a reach. The committee I took it to was focused on the cost, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, can we get people to get out of their cars for an entire month? And I decided that was a stretch. So after we had a couple of successful no fare days in which ridership increased dramatically, I thought, well, why don't we make a limited pilot? This is a 3-year pilot, and let's tie it to, and this is different. We're not saying it's next Friday and you have 10 days to plan. We're not saying you have 2 weeks to plan for how to not turn that car ignition on Thursday and Friday. This is, we're going to wait for the DAQ to communicate to UTA, we see the weather conditions coming on these days. And there's an enormous amount of work on UTA involved in order to cover all the tap-ons and tap-offs on all the fare boxes and all the buses. But, I mean, this is, from my point of view, this is an incentive approach. I mean, there are places in Europe and other places where they'd say, well, we know how to fix this problem. We're just going to make it expensive to drive cars in January, and here's a $2 gasoline, surplus, and it goes to clean air programs. That's going to be difficult to accomplish. I'd like to try an incentive. Say, when we know bad air is coming for a few days, would you be willing to carpool? If you can work from home, if you need to get to work, we're going to incentivize you by helping you get on front runner tracks, the buses, and get to work that way. So I'm excited about the possibilities. I think Utahns will respond for a limited measure. And if we have some good success this year, we're not going to use all 7 days this year. But if we have some good success, we can come back next year. In December, I had people emailing me going, hey, when are we going to use those no fare days? And I go, give us, look, we got to get this set up. Give us some time to get this going. But if we have some days, and next December we have another bad version like we had this December, it would be available for us. And with the coordination between DAQ and UTA. So I'm hopeful.
It would be a wonderful blessing if we didn't exceed 7 days, but thank you for your efforts on that.
I'm just hopeful that if we can get people out of their cars a couple of days in a week, Monday through Friday, and say, see, you can do that. Are you willing to try that again next year and hopefully expand? I created the legislation so that the fund that funds these government can donate to it, private corps can donate to it. I hope if this takes off in the future that we can get some private businesses to, brand a day for their business. Next Wednesday's no fare is being brought to you by this group, but this is a pilot project this year. I appreciate lots of effort on the UTA to help plan for this, and DAQ and DEQ. Hill, Utah has been wonderful. Shout out to my friends on the 4th row back. and I love the legislators who voted for it.
Sure. Absolutely, we do too. How does DQ sort of project? I mean, I know that I use the Utah Air app, and it gives sort of is that basically the same mechanism in which you're sort of forecasting?
Yeah, it is. We do a 3-day forecast. It's almost kind of a 2-day forecast. So today's Wednesday. The forecast would go through Friday. and it would forecast whether a future day is an action day or not. And we know the UTA needs a little more time than that to prepare for to implement a free fair day. So we've set it up so we'll communicate with our forecasters and we can say kind of reasonably if it's going to be an action day when you're ready to implement it.
Sure.
Yeah.
What will be the measure that you look at of air quality? What measure is going to be used that says if this measure exceeds this amount, then we're going to look at a free fair day? Is it PM 2.5?
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's if the forecast shows that in the future we think will exceed the PM 2.5 standard, then we call an action day. It's possible it's a decent air quality day when we have a mandatory action day because our forecasters see an inversion setting in, but our forecasters look at the future and say it looks like we're going to violate the standard in a couple days, and that's when they call a mandatory action.
Okay.
Kent, if I could add one thing, someone did some research for us on Februaries, 3 years of Februaries of riding UTA, because those were the only month 3 years in a row in which we had green, or yellow, orange, and red days in the same month. And what the research showed, looking at all the tap-on and tap-offs and all the ridership, was that people get out of their cars on red days. Transit ridership increases, but they drive more on orange days than on green days. And I think it's because the media does a really good job of highlighting red days. So one of my goals here is, and one of the things I've learned from DAQ, is that an action day may not be a red day. And every legislator starts by going, well, I know what we're going to do. We're going to give free fares on red days. Well, then you start going to Clean Air Caucus, Legislative Caucus, and you start talking to the experts, and you realize it takes days and days and days to make a red day. So my hope with this program is we can start educating people to say, well, you know what, if we get out a couple of days before that, we can, or we have, and one of the things I've learned from the scientists at the U is that the impact, there are red days and there are red days. There's red days that we don't want any red day, but some are worse than others. Or if we can lower there'll be fewer trips to the hospital. There'll be fewer asthma emergencies. There'll be fewer health problems for people with heart and lung conditions. But we want eventually to get rid of red days. That's our goal. But we're educating the public here. It's going to take a few years, but this is our start, and I'm excited for the start, and we appreciate very much UTA's participation and support.
Well, I wanted to say thank you so much to you, Representative, as well as Heel, that's in the fourth row, and certainly Monica and UTA. You guys have all been really passionate about this and really worked hard to get us to this level. And so I wanted to thank you for your efforts. And just a little bit of background, we have done free fare days in the past years, and they have increased ridership. They have had a little more notice, and they have been sponsored by organizations in the past. And so I think that with that background and then heading to this, I think we're going to really have a great opportunity to hopefully minimize the number of red air days, as you stated the goal. I was wondering if I could have Andrea speak for a moment on the work that the communications team did in terms of getting a designated logo for this, so that we can hopefully get the public to recognize that if we're using this logo, this is what this means. So if you wouldn't mind kind of articulating that would be great.
Sure. So we have worked with the partners to basically make this program that is funded through this legislation very identifiable. So when people see this out in the system, that this Free Fair Day is brought to you by this, they know it is related to this program. So we're essentially creating awareness about the legislature's support and DAQ's support in making this happen. We're also working on the communications plans for when the Red Air Days are called. And the great thing about having these partners is they all have great communication staff and everybody is pooling their resources. So we are working on communication plans right now, as we don't know yet when those Red Air Days will be. And then when DAQ gives us the notice, then everybody will just kind of go into action. And both for us operationally and preparing to cover fare boxes and all the things that we need to do, but then also getting the word out to the public. So we have worked on those creative elements to identify this program. And then as far as communications and spreading the word, all the partners will be using their channels and their resources to get the word out. So we're really, it's a great partnership.
I will view this as a real success when we see private companies sponsoring free fare days, especially the Larry H. Miller companies.
I would think that.
Get out of your car and take transit.
I would think
Select
that
Health was one of the sponsors last year.
the auto dealers, I've talked to some of them, I said, once this ramps up, you can paint yourself a little bit greener. And why don't you put some money in? Could I make one other note, Mr. Chair?
Sure. Yeah.
The amount of a fare box day we've been using we were educated at our last meeting that amount did not include ski buses up the canyons. So we elected to say it would not be politically wise for us to tell skiers that day, you have to pay a fare, but everyone else doesn't. So when the DAQ and UTA say, okay, well, these are the 2 days we're going to try, it's going to include ski buses.
That's good.
We love our skiers and we love our
Hopefully those days will come in July then.
I'm not a skier, but I totally understand why people want to get up on July 4th and
Snowbird
risk their lives
might
going down the
be-
mountain dodging rocks.
Well, I can't imagine the red snake going up the canyons is any more beneficial than
That's right.
than anything else. So that's probably a good decision. Well, good. Monica, anything else that we need to be aware of on this?
Not that I can think of, no.
Well, with that, I'll turn to my colleague Beth. Do you want to make a motion on this particular?
I would be happy to. I would like to make a motion that we approve the sponsored fare agreement for the trip reduction program, free fare days, with DAQ, with the Utah legislature, and all of our other partners.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Representative Briscoe, thank you. We know you had a busy morning, and we appreciate you taking time.
Thank you.
As well as our partners from DAQ and those who've joined us in the audience. I'll step back to item number A, which is a complimentary fare for the 2020 legislative staff. Monica, anything you want to say here?
Yes, I will speak quickly to that, and then Andrea and I will talk about the third item. So the complimentary passes for the legislative, this will be for the legislative staff and part of the 2020 legislative session that takes place from January 27th through March 12th at the Utah State Capitol. And in the spirit of collaboration, UTA and legislative staff worked together on several public transportation initiatives in an effort to mitigate air pollution and reduce single occupancy trips, as you just saw one of our efforts in collaboration. I am seeking approval with this specific request for up to 50 passes for employees that are not part of the state EcoPass program. And the complimentary passes do exceed $5,000 in value, which is why we're requiring your approval today. So we will move forward with activating and distributing the passes if you approve this request.
Will 50 be enough?
We've gone back and forth on the numbers. We do feel at this time that 50 is enough.
I think we have a little bit of a history as far as usage goes, right? Or requests.
That's correct.
Now, you mentioned the start of the legislature on the 27th through March the 12th. Does the staff start a week early?
I'm not
And
sure
go
of
a
the
week
exact
later?
start date, but we are going to go ahead and get them issued after
Right away?
this meeting. So
Okay.
they will have the option if they need them a few days earlier or later to use them.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on this complimentary fare.
I move that we approve the complimentary fare for the legislative staff for 2020.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you for getting that taken care of.
Thank you.
And that brings us down to tumbleweeds.
Yes, so Andrea and I, we're here today to seek approval for this special fair request. This will allow Tumbleweeds Film Festival attendees to ride UTA free of charge on the day of the festival using their ticket. And I will let Andrea provide a little bit of a background and some more information on this festival.
Thanks, Andrea.
Sure, thank you. This is a great opportunity and is really part of kind of our community outreach and education efforts. So the Tumbleweeds Film Festival is organized by representatives of the Utah Film Center. It is the only festival in the Intermountain area that is for children. And so they do bring in international and very culturally driven films for a period, and then engage refugees, low-income and minority children and their families to come in and attend and participate in this festival. So it's a very community-based effort to enrich the lives and give children an opportunity to participate in something like this. They approached us last year. This would be our second year partnering with them, realizing that this group of children and families also struggles with transportation, that would UTA be willing to partner and also help them get to the film festival. And so our sponsorship arrangement with them does include them the opportunity to use kind of a ticket as fare to get to the festival, and then in exchange we receive a sponsorship package with logos on the movies before the screens. Our logo is on the ticket, and we basically get kind of advertising and agency exposure in exchange. And so that is the essence of it. They felt it was very successful last year, and this year it's even expanding to 2 weekends. Last year it was 1 weekend, and so they are expanding the program to these children, and I think it's been a great partnership for UTA to get out and help these children and families.
Andrew, what's the site of Tumbleweed? I mean, I assume it's near a transit stop.
Excuse me. It is at the, I believe it's at the Leonardo, correct? I believe, yeah.
Or the public main library?
Yeah, it's right adjacent to
Okay.
transit, yeah.
Okay, so it has lots of options.
Yes.
What are the dates?
March.
Early March.
Yeah.
March 6th through the 8th.
March 6th through the 8th and March 12th through the 15th this year.
Well, tumbleweed seems to be an appropriate name. I noticed that yesterday after our windstorm, that there were tumbleweeds stacked up between all of the cars in our parking lot right out here.
Yeah, that's true.
So we must be just south of the tumbleweed creation lot or whatever, because there were lots of tumbleweeds stacked up between the cars yesterday, right out here in our parking lot. So great name.
Part of the marketing strategy. Unless there's other questions, I would entertain a motion on this complimentary fare.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the complimentary fare for the Tumbleweeds Film Festival with the Utah Film Center.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Gonna take roughly about a 7-minute break, and we'll come back to the discussion on the fairs and
Thank you.
so if we can try to get everybody back by about 18 after the hour, that'd be great. Okay. We welcome everybody back from a short but needed break, and excited about the next discussion item, which is a low-income fair pilot program. And I know it has Bob and Monica listed here, but I know there's been a lot of work to this point, and a lot of things to learn as we go forward. So Monica, are you leading this discussion?
I will lead it today, yes.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you. So I have 3 areas to cover. First, I will share with you the reasons why we are requesting to do this pilot. And then second, I will cover how we envision the pilot working. And last, I'll go over some key elements of this pilot and establish some recommended parameters. So currently UTA offers a homeless program, but we would like to expand it to other human service agencies. For example, these would be agencies working with residents of a correction facility, individuals in temporary housing, those working with a case manager. This could also include students receiving free or reduced lunch, or people that might be part of an addiction or recovery program, to give you an example of a few. So the pilot will help us understand the needs of these organizations as we work with them and the clients that they serve. And we started down this path by creating a task force that met in November with some of the contacts that we already have. So it's an opportunity for sure to strengthen and expand our partnerships. We definitely reach more people in the community when we have partnerships with these other entities. It'll also allow us to utilize electronic fare media as we phase out tokens, and this media has several benefits which will be important to this pilot. And a final benefit that I would like to point out is our ability to understand the administrative challenges, which will be important, and especially as we look at moving this away from a pilot to a permanent program. So the pilot then will be an arrangement between UTA and the human service organizations that provide varying levels of assistance to their clients. So UTA's role then would be to administer the contract, to make discounted fare products available for purchase, and then to receive the fare payment. The human service organizations would determine the client eligibility. They would purchase the fare products from us. They would also administer the program. An example of that administration would be they would track and distribute the fare media. And then as a last point, UTA would require the human service agency to, these agencies to distribute the fares at no cost to their clients. And then the client's role, working with these organizations, they receive assistance and they are able to ride transit. So that's how we envision from a high level the program, the pilot working. So there are 4 key elements I want to go over. They include fare media, which we'll be using as proof of fare payment that the rider needs to retain throughout their trip, and the fare products that we will offer, the discount rate that we'll apply to the fare products, and then the eligibility requirement to participate in the program. So what I'd like to do is show you each one of these and what we're currently doing with the homeless contract, and then make a recommendation of what this pilot could look like. And I'm definitely seeking your input on these recommendations in order to run the pilot within some parameters that we agree on. So the first element is the fare media. As I mentioned earlier, we're currently using paper and tokens. So in the recommendation column, we will be moving from EFC to Fair Pay. The EFC cards would be pre-printed cards with a logo that can be tapped on and tapped off. And then we would also be using the Fair Pay card, which is one of our electronic reloadable fare medias. So the next element is the discount rate, and it's currently 50%. I do recommend a higher discount. The group of clients served by these organizations rely heavily on transit and have extremely limited means of income. If we prioritize our discounts as an agency, the low-income segment that's being subsidized by our partners should receive the highest discount. So I recommend a discount definitely no lower than 50%, but higher than 75%. And I want to speak just a little bit too about our revenue that we receive from our current homeless partners. We're between about $500,000 to $1 million, and shifting this, discount higher and adjusting our mix will obviously result in a loss of revenue, but I do want to suggest that our need for transit exceeds the amount of passes being purchased. And with that excess budget, we do feel like there will be several agencies that will buy more passes with these, because often these passes are given out on a first come, first served basis. So if the additional savings that they receive from whatever discount we agree upon is rolled back into that, then we would hopefully expect to be revenue neutral. We do have some agencies that are paying full price now. We're not aware of their purchases, and they could come in then and be paying half. And then we would hope that if additional agencies that are now able to participate could see the savings, if they're not purchasing and subsidizing transit now, that they would come forth and want to participate with this pricing, which would result in new revenue. So our goal then is to grow our revenue in this segment, and for us, that's a signal of success that we're getting transit passes into the community by partnering with these agencies. Fair products is the third element that we want to make available, and right now we sell a monthly pass, a one-way, and a day pass, and I do recommend that we maintain those same products, but with the flexibility to add additional products if needed. An example of that might be if we're hearing from organizations that they're interested in a 3-day pass or a 7-day pass, we could also accommodate that as part of this pilot if the need arises. With EFC, it's nice because the fare product can be shifted easily. If we're using an EFC card, we can shift it from expiring at 3 a.m. the next day, if it's a day pass, to expiring 72 hours after first tap off, or as long as we would want to set that card for. So we can accommodate very easily an additional product. We talked as part of our outreach group, we got some feedback on this pilot. Several organizations did confirm that these 3 products would meet the majority of their needs, and that's what we would like to go out with. But I do want to point out that, we don't expect to customize the fare product to every contract, because obviously that would be extremely burdensome and cumbersome to manage. But for this pilot, it is important that we do identify what are the fare products that are needed and utilize both the most, and then narrowing in on those products as part of our final output. The EFC card will be used for the daily and monthly passes, and then the one-way fare would be available through the Fare Pay card. That's how it's utilized now. So these fare products are valid on regular service and based on regular fare pricing in order to keep the pricing and costs down, but there are instances where the need arises for some of our organizations to utilize FrontRunner. So what we're doing with FrontRunner is suggesting that these organizations use the Fare Pay card, because we can accommodate a full discount percentage. Say that's 50%. We can set the entire Fare Pay card to be 50% off a one-way trip, regardless of the service type, and automatically apply it to all of those trips. So if the need is there, a Fare Pay card should hopefully cover that need. And the last item I want to go over is eligibility, which talks about who's eligible to participate. So you can see that currently we have homeless providers that are assisting the homeless and a nonprofit organization. And in that contract also allows for school districts. And we will expand the eligibility then, as you can see in my recommendation, to human service organizations that are assisting the low income and are a nonprofit 501c3. So we're maintaining similar parameters, but I do want to speak a minute about what I mean when I say assisting low income individuals. Because our pilot program is identifying groups, like I said earlier, that we consider low income, such as those in addiction recovery programs, working with a case worker or mentor, receiving temporary housing, or the homeless. And we recognize that each agency serves different client needs. But our goal with this pilot is not to fit all of the agencies into the same definition of low income. So we would look to our partner agencies to use their qualifying standards and create a case-by-case judgment when it comes to defining low income and who they provide transit to. So those are some of the key elements. Those are 4 of the key elements that I'm recommending. I'd also, before I go on to my last slide of next steps, would like to point out that I'm being joined today by Mr. James Yappius. He is the Director of Development for the Salt Lake School District and the Director of the Salt Lake Education Foundation. We have been working with him, and I'd like to invite him up just for a few minutes and share a few stats with you as it relates to students, and we're grateful for his cooperation.
Good morning. How are you?
Welcome, Jim.
Well, first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some important data with you, and Monica and Kenzie have been great. I think what's important is for us to really have a clear understanding of our student population. We have a total of 16 Title I elementary schools and 3 middle schools. And when we look at the district-wide, percentage-wise, 57% of our student population out of 23,410 are in free and reduced lunch. Over 90% of the Title I school on the west side, students are also on free and reduced lunch. Mr. Christensen, you've had a lot of experience working with our schools. We see families struggling to get to receive medical care. Transportation's been significant for them. We've had parent-teacher conferences that some may not be able to make it. As a matter of fact, East, we became very innovative as far as having parent-teacher conferences at Glendale, having all of our teachers go to the west side and having that meeting there, and also Jackson Elementary, but that only addresses one aspect of it. And we've also had many opportunities. We were talking about Stadler earlier. I was listening to your conversation. We've been able to partner with businesses as it relates to apprenticeship programs and getting students ready for, career, even through the community college. But what we're finding is a lot of our students in the Glendale Rose Park area have limited access. We're thankful to what you've done this last summer. On August 1st, you were able to give us more routes. Families are really happy about that. But we think that by expanding this and giving this opportunity as a pilot project is significant for us. Our superintendent could not be here today, but I was asked to come by and share that information with you.
Thank you, Mr. Yappius.
One question I had, and thanks, James. It's a good reminder. Could workforce serve, obviously the school district, but they have their foundation, but could somebody like Workforce Services take advantage of this if they're working with somebody who's going through sort of a re-education process?
If they're subsidizing it for 100%, which that would be kind of the borderline, is if they would be willing to subsidize that and give the fair media to that individual for free.
Okay. I didn't know when I was looking at it, I didn't know if they qualify as a human service org or if they have to be a nonprofit.
But they would have to be a nonprofit.
They would have to.
Unless we wrote that. I mean, it's our pilot, right? And so to the extent these questions come up like this one, we could expand that definition or contract it, as we felt like if the pilot there was a need for somebody that we had not identified that wanted to participate, then we could easily adjust that.
The only reason I say that is I know that Workforce Services often have ways that which they could pay for something as part of somebody going through a retraining program or something like that. And
yeah,
and I wonder, like a public agency.
So we did have them represented at our outreach program. They told us that typically that's done by reimbursement, and so it would be difficult probably in a contract like this to be able to work an arrangement out, because they take, I don't want to misrepresent them wrong, but from what I remember during the meeting, they get receipts back typically and give reimbursement, or they put money on, I think, a card. So we would have to probably consider something different and get their cooperation and moving to a different model where they're not subsidizing. And I think we could easily do that to where they're giving a transit pass, you know, and I will point out that on the EFC card, I failed to mention this earlier, but this is going to be a 30-day monthly pass, and right now we have calendar month passes. So with this flexibility in the past, what we heard our outreach partners say is that it's very difficult when they go on a calendar monthly basis if you're halfway through the month and trying to get those distributed and then get new passes back in your hand. And so I think this would lend them the convenience to be able to say, oh, it's a 30-day pass and it's active from first tap. They can have a stack, give it, they get the full 30 days for their money. And so an arrangement like this actually might be able to help them change their processes if we work together.
Ken, you had a question, and then Ben.
Well, the issue of the 501c3 nonprofit. Now, I realize that most organizations, probably 98% of them that are working with low-income people are 501c3s, but it's not 100%. Would it be possible for us to say that the eligibility would include a nonprofit 501c3 typically, but not limited to 501c3, so that other organizations, companies, or some group that is not necessarily a 501c3 could actually participate and still meet our requirements for eligibility, where typically it's a 501c3, but it's not limited to that.
I definitely think we can. You know, we did have a corporation reach out to us that's serving the homeless and wanted to buy passes because they did give them for free to a certain segment.
Right.
And so I think that would be great if we could accommodate that 2%.
Or whatever percent it is, it's a
Right,
small
right, right.
percent that's not going to be a 501c3, but I don't want to exclude them.
Sure.
Just because they haven't filed a 501c3 and went through a 2-year cycle to try to get the designation from the IRS.
Yeah, I think for the pilot, that would be great. What we'll assess then as part of the pilot is, okay, you know.
Who is participating?
Right. And then we obviously want parameters, but we want them because we want to be able to serve, you know, as many people as possible. And so if that is something that works out in the pilot, and we are able to narrow it down, I support that.
Okay.
I had a question in terms of, I had a Davis County education individual affiliated with Davis County Schools ask a question about the passes that they would give for homeless teenagers, specifically getting them to high schools. And their question was, how do they, I think you answered part of it in the sense that they were like, how do we get more passes? Because we only have X amount, and then when they're gone, they're gone. And so how would that look a little bit? If you could maybe give me a little more parameters on that, that would be great.
Yeah, so, you know, right now with the homeless program, the organizations can come up to our customer service outlet or they can contact our past programs. We can get them more. They typically have their name on a list, and so they come and they can purchase as many as they want, but typically they're limited in their budget dollars, so they only have $1,000 spend. We're saying if we bring the discount higher, this is now going to allow them to distribute $1,300 within their $5,000 budget, just because in this instance with this pilot we would be increasing the discount. But in any instance that they needed more passes, they simply just come to us and get them as they need them. And some people purchase them at the beginning of the month, a certain quantity. Some people purchase twice a month. And then some people are just as needed. When their stack runs out, they come and get more. So it really depends on the agency and how their purchasing and distribution process works. But we're happy to accommodate as many passes as anybody needs at any time, both in our homeless program now and with this pilot program.
And it sounds like the way that you're going to be doing this, whether it's a straight 30-day pass as opposed to a calendar monthly pass, I think that sounds definitely more efficient, especially because these requests, as it was explained to me, come in at all times of the month, right?
Yeah, and you know, the concern that we hear is that they're not getting their money's worth even out of a $42 pass, but they want to get a monthly pass into an individual's hands, even if there's 10, days left in the month, and then we're recounting the passes when we get the passes back. And it is a pretty heavy administrative burden. But now with the EFC card being a monthly pass, we will set the expiration 30 days from first tap on. And so they can have a stack of monthly passes, distribute them anytime throughout the month. And then when the student taps on, it expires 30 days later. So there are some, a few challenges with that and understanding then the expiration dates, but we do feel like this would be important to pilot and understand what those challenges are, because in the long run, we feel like this is a better fair media for that reason.
And I just had a follow-up question to that. I know that this is a pilot, and I know that there'll be some fluidity in terms of how this will ultimately look. But is there an opportunity to reach out to all of these as defined human service organizations, nonprofits, et cetera, and homeless providers, that so that they can know that this is the new format and a new program that is going to be piloted?
Yes, absolutely. So we want this to be successful, and it does take communication and coordination. We do have some contacts now in a pool that we've been working with, and we're hoping to be active and make phone calls, send emails, spread the word, both through our current contacts anybody may have. There are lists out there. We've worked with the homeless groups that have a list, and some of them aren't participating now, so we know who those are and we can reach out to them. And you all have given us references, and so I think we can definitely communicate that because we want this pilot to be utilized.
Well, can I just say something about that too? I think what's really important too is you've taken a really step forward in addressing the needs of our homeless and our low, our families that are struggling. It would be great to have a marketing campaign to really focus on that, because with the foundation, all the schools have a 501c3 foundation in their schools, in addition a homeless liaison. But I think with all the community partners, we would be willing to work with those community and be the outreach to the outreach arm to the Utah Transit Authority to be able to support that, because I think this has been I appreciate you guys doing all the work with the task force. I think this is significant. I think it would be great to do really more of a marketing an opportunity where we're talking about it, to share about the information and the opportunities that families will have in addressing the homeless and families in poverty.
I'm assuming that every school district then would be considered a human service organization.
Yes, the way the homeless policy reads now, we have definitely a handful of those purchasing right now,
Okay.
but they would be, because it calls out specifically school districts in
So it
the
wouldn't be
language.
just Salt Lake School District?
No.
It could be any
It's,
school
yeah,
district
it
in
can-
our
it says school
service
districts.
area. Okay.
Correct.
And I was just going to say, and from my old job when we administered CDBG grants, a lot of those public agencies actually sort of have lists because they have to go out through a sort of open invitation to apply for those grants. So I think I can help you there if you need it. But most of those agencies, they apply through multiple grant applicants, just because those funds are limited to certain geographical areas, but the same agency applies to probably 20 grant applicants along the Wasatch Front, depending on who has money.
And then just to emphasize, we're working with Mr. Yappius, but also other agencies that have stepped up and said, hey, we'll help administer, we'll help bring other people into this, we'll help. And so there has been a lot of support as we've gotten this off the ground. And I think that's what will also help make it successful.
You had some percentages there, 60 to 75%. Personally, I lean toward the 75%, but I don't know if you had thoughts about what that looks or smells like or should be. Are you looking for a recommendation, or you want to?
I definitely want to hear where you're leaning, so I appreciate that. Are there any other thoughts?
Yes, 75%.
Okay, so we feel strongly that
I think that
75% is a good starting, okay.
As well. And I just was curious, do we have like a defined number of organizations? Like, is it like 30? Is it 60? What that looks like if we already have all that data?
To participate? We've gone back and forth. So we're like, yeah, we're going to limit this to 20. And, we don't right now because we feel like we have the capacity to accommodate. And to the extent that gets to be overwhelming, we can revisit it. But we did decide at this point not to put any caps or anything on the number of participating for the pilot.
Just so you know, every school district has a 501c3, so that's over 40. And I'm the chair for the school foundations for the state. So this is great news. This is great news for us, and I think that's the information she's sharing. Absolutely, we'll be able to do a lot of the groundwork for UTA.
And I think when it comes to the school districts, and we talked about who qualifies for low income, and there's always that question, okay, is it free? Is it reduced? Is it the homeless? Is it the school's definition of the homeless? We can set that parameter, and if there's interest here in yes, free and reduced, or just homeless within the school districts, or just free and homeless within the school districts, we can outline a general parameter that, again, is not a tight box, because we recognize some students, parents may not have applied for the free or reduced lunch, but they are still in need. Which is in that instance where we would rely on the school district's judgment, but we can set a parameter within the school districts and determine what level we want that low income guidance to be directed towards.
That's a tough one, in the sense that I liked the thought process that you let the organization sort of determine sort of those parameters. I mean, most of these organizations aren't taking folks who are at the high income. If they're in the high income level or were in the high income level, they've hit the skids somehow and they're struggling and those kind of things. So I think, based on the parameters of who could access it, that's going to determine a lot, because their funding's going to be tied, to be honest, to those lower income things anyway. And they're going to have to be able to demonstrate that, whether it's to the IRS in the case of a foundation or a grant application. So it would probably reduce your administrative headache if you're not having to heavily define that. But unless you need some parameter just for sanity's sake.
Well, schools are important to us, and especially when it comes to fairs. We have a lot of emphasis right now on the universities. We're trying to get emphasis here within the school districts, in the high school and the younger students. But this is a great step, I think. Obviously, our end goal is to have passes in all of the students' hands, and this is one step forward. But to work towards a pilot with the school districts or an arrangement with the school districts that could serve a greater need outside of this is also not off the table, because having Salt Lake School District as a good partner could allow us, both through this pilot or a separate pilot, be able to figure out how to get the passes in everybody's hands.
Well, with that, we have the option here to go ahead and approve the low-income fair pilot program. Have we given you some feedback enough to know what that program looks like, or do you need us to define it?
No, I have the feedback I need. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Carolyn, do you feel like we're in a position operationally to implement this?
Can we quickly just go through the slides on what's recommended that would help?
Sure.
Us to define it better. So you're fine with the recommendations we have. We have a discount rate for 60 to 75%.
75%.
You're recommending 75%. The fair products you're fine with as well for the recommendation.
Right.
And what's the next? Is the
fair products being regular service, unless the other option is regular service with. We need to just confirm that it's regular service. We're okay.
So that means not ski bus and not paratransit? Is that
And
what
not
you're
front
saying?
runner, correct.
Not front runner, not express. And that's usually we're not seeing, we're going to take a look at that. If there's a need, we'll talk to them. But most of it is strictly on the bus and the rail system because they're shorter.
Right.
They're not as far
And
tracked.
it sounds like if you truly had somebody that's needs a front runner access, you can accommodate that somehow through the fair pay
Correct.
card, right?
Correct.
Right.
Okay, great.
That was my one pause, but
Yeah,
I'm
and we
okay
did.
going
We had a
slow.
discussion about that before we came. We thought the pilot could focus on that area, and then the last one was the 501(c) is just to
Is
to
typically a
potentially
501(c).
do that, or a purpose that's similar to what
Right.
the low-income program is reaching out to. So they have to have, not two passes by a corporation. It would be something that would be something
Sure.
more of an assistance to the low-income community.
Right.
Okay.
And
Right.
they're defining that status of low income, right? They're doing their self-definitions, yeah.
Okay.
So one other thing you may want to think about is the duration of the pilot. And just talking out loud right now might be through the end of next school year, like through May 2020, 2021, something of that nature. So you've got plenty of time with the pilot to make adjustments.
Does that give you long enough to
It
have
does.
a meaningful
It does.
experience?
Oh, I was just going to pop up here real quick. Do you have anything else, Carolyn?
Can I suggest the end of June, just because school goes
Yeah.
into
So the end of June 2020? 2021, okay, good. I was going to say, that's really close if it was 2020. Okay, 2021, that works for us. The one thing I want to make sure is that this isn't going to conflict with, but it will help inform, once we get past the fair policy going forward, what the next piece will be. So, and we are looking at potentially any changes would be coming in and really be studied next summer of 2021 for any changes we would have on the fairs.
So, then I forgot I had this slide, but we're doing the board discussion now. We have established parameters. We need approval of the pilot. We'll create and approve a legal contract that we can use with these agencies. Obviously, enter the contracts, secure the fair media, and begin the sales and distribution. So we're pretty close to all the way there.
If we were to approve this pilot program today, are you in a position to begin to implement it right away?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we would probably, but the thing that we need to do is the contract with legal.
Right.
But aside from that, I would say no longer than a couple weeks. We could.
You would anticipate even with legal that it would be within a couple weeks? or
Well,
would you need,
legal's
like, a
really
couple
quick,
months?
but we could say a week.
What?
I'm just thinking.
Legal is really quick.
Oh.
Yeah,
No, I'm going to put that plug in for them.
We're not pushing you. You should take
We will be the
whatever.
guinea pig, the organization to start as quickly as we
Yeah, I think by the end of the month, which is just a couple weeks away, if you could give us a
that
couple
really
weeks.
is-
Yeah, or earlier. But
And then I do think it would be maybe in about 6 months or so after the summer, give a report back on or maybe after
what
this
we've
end of
learned
the
so
school year,
far.
what we've learned
Sure.
so far. But maybe during the summer, we'll come back with what we learned today.
And for some of, and for the record, some of us think legal is quick, so.
they're quick for us. Okay.
That was not a negative reflection. I just tried to encompass everybody, both sides of legal.
All right. Other questions?
Just one other thing. We
please.
did mention a little bit about doing some kind of marketing campaign for this program, and so we'll coordinate with that division here to try to outreach a little bit more to some of the other 501(c)(3)s.
Well, it seems like we've got a conduit into the schools.
Right.
Yes.
I was going to say,
Already.
I think if our communications folks, worked on an information piece, a lot of these nonprofits could then do the communication.
That's what I'm thinking. So that's what I was thinking, mostly just a communication piece that we could use then.
Right.
Okay.
With that in mind, then, I would make a motion that we approve this pilot program with the parameters that we've identified to last from the beginning of February of 2020 through June of 2021 as a pilot program.
I would say just want to add that we recommended the 75%. I would put that in there.
Yes, that including the parameters that we've identified.
I will
Certainly, absolutely, 75% discount.
So I have a motion and a second and a clarification that the parameters were 75% on the income or the reduction level and the dates that were specified. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Carolyn, and for all your
James,
staff
thank you
that
very
have
much.
worked hard on this, I know, and will work hard. It'll be a great thing for us. Next up is a UTA long-range plan process, and And I see a number of folks in the audience, but we have Alex and Mary's back with us, and then.
Yeah, and Laura and Carrie are here as well if we need them to help answer any questions.
That's you.
So this,
And long range, you mean more than a week, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a planning initiative that we're very excited about. And it's going to help provide coordination between the many different plans that the various departments at UTA have to prepare on a regular basis. Alex and Carrie came and presented to the executive team a few weeks ago, and everybody was very supportive of that, and we thought the next step was to come here and present it to you. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex to discuss it.
Thanks, Mary. Good morning. So I'm going to start with talking about the need a little bit and then discuss the process, and we'll have time for input and any questions throughout. So one of the things that we see a need for a UTA agency-wide long-range plan is we see a gap that exists today between the regional transportation plans that are created by our MPOs and our internal planning processes. What often happens is the MPOs look at regionally significant projects, and so what will often happen then is something doesn't show up as a line on a map, and we're still doing things in those communities. And the most visible plans available now are those MPO plans. So then we have communities that are coming and saying, what about us? You know, what are you doing to help us? And we have lots of other things going on. And this kind of bridges that gap and also allows us to kind of use our internal planning processes to work with the MPOs rather than just the MPOs bringing their suggestions to us on what the planning idea should be. So as you all probably know, we have multiple plans underway with throughout the agency. We have fleet planning, capital planning, facilities plans, TOD planning, bus stop planning, our financial plans, as well as external planning that we're working with. And we need a way to really bring all those things together. So an example that I'd like to share that we have now in our planning process is when we look at how many buses we need to purchase in the future, we have our service, our 5-year service plan that kind of outlines how we're going to add service and where, and that generates a number. We also have our fleet plan, and that uses a ridership forecasting tool that estimates and comes up with potentially a different number. And then we have our RTP plans, and they look at the regionally significant plans, and they may have a third number. So obviously we don't want to have 3 different numbers that we then have to reconcile and 3 different planning processes to determine how many buses. So what we want to do is have a single process for, just as an example, to determine how many buses we need. So this is throughout the agency, we see this sort of thing. So we think that an agency-wide plan is a good way to address some of those issues. And I'd like to talk about a couple of the big overarching goals that we see for that. So number 1 is agency alignment. So as I mentioned with the bus planning, consistency in our planning process. It will allow us to prioritize expenditures and not have us competing against ourselves. So we can put everything together and see where we want to prioritize our spending. It helps with our timeline and phasing development. So as we expand our service, as we do new projects, how does that affect our need for additional garages, additional facilities? That all needs to be planned together. Internal coordination, obviously, and then I think we'll discover some gaps in our planning processes that we're able to fill in through this. Another big overarching goal that we see for the plan is external transparency. As we know with our new governance structure here that we want to be open UTA available to the public, and we see an agency-wide plan as a public relations and marketing tool to show everything that UTA is working on. It's a tool that you as members of the board can take to the community and point to And when they say, what are your plans in X community, you can look in the plan and see what we're planning in your community. As I mentioned before, it's that bridge between the local and regional plans. And it kind of helps us look kind of holistically at how all the outcomes we expect, environmental, social, and economic outcomes of our planning process. So I'm going to talk about our expected planning process for just a minute here. We want to start by defining goals and objectives of the plans, and we see that being the guiding direction of the plan, and we definitely anticipate that to be in alignment with the overall goals of the agency, and we'll be looking for input from agency leadership and the board on what we see as the overarching direction for the goals of the plan. Once we've established those goals and objectives, we think we'll be moving into the data collection phase, which we see as kind of a three-part with our external needs or voice of the customer, which includes our stakeholders, the customers who ride the service, taxpayers, partner agencies, all the city governments, as well as considering all the needs of the business and our internal needs, state of good repair, our financial plans, our human resources needs, new technology development, and needs of facilities. And we see those coming together through the process of developing the long-range plan. So after data collection, we will do some analysis and sort of take all our plans throughout the agency, pull those together, see how they impact different department plans, look at conflicts of time, expenditures, and consider different factors in decision making, and pull that information through, and that's all going to feed into the long range plan. Our projected outcomes of the plan would be development of some alternatives and screening. So once we've pulled together the disparate planning processes throughout the agency, look at where there are conflicts in the plans or where things need to be resolved, and kind of give some future direction on what needs to change in terms of resolving inconsistencies, aligning our revenues and expenditures. And we also see this plan as helping to determine future goals for the agency. Our anticipated deliverables would be a easily digestible executive summary for someone who doesn't want to read a telephone book-sized manual, as well as an online presence with links to all of the individual plans, an interactive map that allows people to move around our region and see what's underway at UTA, as well as some performance measures dashboard to see how we're doing on our plan goals, as well as a full report and document. So the plan will document the robust sort of public input that we use as an integral part of all the planning process we have in our individual plans now. But in addition to that, we see a separate public input process for this plan itself to make sure that it's in line with our community's goals. So moving to the timeline and sustainability of the plan. We're looking at right now potentially somewhere around a 30-year horizon for the plan, but also would include a short-term horizon of 5 to 10 years. So that would also include our 5-year planning, short-term planning projects that we have. And we are looking to likely update it about every 4 years, and we haven't figured out exactly how it will tie in with the planning process of the RTP cycle, but we anticipate that feeding into both what they do and what we do, feeding into each other. What we want to do, because we know that this is going to be an especially heavy lift for the first go, is to really focus on what we can get done so the project doesn't get so overwhelming that we don't get a first draft done. And once again, I do want to emphasize that this isn't a singular document to sit on a shelf, but much like the MPO's RTP, to be a living document that we update over time. We've got a very draft timeline to look at some of the phasing, which really sort of began with a discussion with the strategic planning group about developing a long-range plan. As Mary pointed out, we've talked to the executive director and the executive team, and they are supportive. We're right now at the third little flag of presenting to the board for discussion. From there, we anticipate going to meet with department heads to begin the discussion of collecting all this data. We think the analysis is going to take quite a bit of time in the data collection. We're going to look to develop outcomes, as I mentioned, put everything together, report back, update, review, and hopefully have sometime in next year, we anticipate having a draft document ready for board approval, and then that will be our official document once that's ready. So finally, I just wanted to share that what we see the role of the strategic planning division being as in the creation of this document is, you know, we're not the experts across the agency. There are people who know the bus fleet. There's people who know the light rail. There's people who know all the different parts of the agency. But we see ourselves as ambassadors, bringing those groups together to look at the different plans they're working on and really kind of building relationships and breaking down silos between the departments so there's more open communication about what each group is working on. Then we see us as the group that's kind of reviewing the plans and analyzing and looking at where we need to come together and review and communicate that information. And of course, we'll be creators of so. And with that, I'll open it to questions.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for initiating this process. Having once lived in the mecca of master plans, aka Salt Lake City, that none of them tied together. I don't think, in fact, I think their general plan was like 1960s, and there was often, you know, contradictions even from one neighborhood to the next. And just politically, it became challenging. But so I think, and you see that a little bit internally, you know, I'll hear somebody say, well, we're going to build this building, XXX. And I think to myself, well, who determined that and what led into that? And why is that necessary at this point? Or is this the best place for it? And almost like the decisions are predetermined. And even as a board, you know, we're working from a strategic plan that was really set by the prior board, and it's not a, you know, it's not a negative, but after having been here a year, I'd like some input into where that strategic plan goes, and you know, we've had this conversation about in conjunction with the executive team of having a new one. How do you meld that into this long-range plan so that when you get done assimilating and coordinating all these things, you don't find yourself here and the strategic plans over here? And the timeline probably allows for some alignment, but I just wondered if you had given that any thought.
Sure. The strategic plan, I think we see as a more vision document, a higher level, and what the agency is trying to accomplish. And we think that it's a great tool to feed and have a back and forth discussion with the long-range plan. The long-range plan is more the nuts and bolts of what are the specific things we're going to do in this community, this community, this community. Yeah. And so the strategic plan, I think, can help supply the vision to the long-range plan. And the things that we're doing in the long-range plan should feed, there should definitely be a meshing between the two. And as that's updated, we certainly see them working together.
And then I think your timing's probably actually good because the RTP will begin its process in about a year and a half or a year. I could be off, Laura, but
Yes.
it's usually 2 years up to it, and they approved it last year. And so it would be nice, and I've experienced why is there only one bus line in our city, and they're looking at the regional plan, not our local plans. So I think having that information and layered that people can access. will be
Exactly.
really
We're
helpful.
hoping to see that type of document where people can look at exactly what you're talking about, what's on the RTP, what's not on the RTP that is also in the LRP. So, yes.
Well,
Beth, no, please.
thank you. I had a kind of a similar along the lines of what Chair Christensen just said is if I'm a community that doesn't have maybe, a full line of services, like there's no tracks, it's currently bus, what would that look like? And I think that by structuring it in a way that it can answer those micro level questions as well as the overall, I think that can really go a long way to having that level of integration that I'm thinking that I'm seeing what you're saying is,
Yes.
is what you're wanting to do. And if there is a way to incorporate that, I all for it, because I think that one of the things that is the question I get by going to some of these city councils that are more, they don't have a great deal of service yet, they're not fully built out or numerous reasons why, but they always ask, well, right now we only have a bus stop. What does that look like long term? Or we only have one bus that comes like during peak hours, or what does that look like? And those are the questions I think that will be really helpful, because if we can all be in that, we're in the same space and we're looking at this from the same perspective, I think that will be really valuable. So thank you.
Yes, that's exactly one of the things we're trying to accomplish with this plan, because we know that there are some communities that, for a number of reasons, aren't to a place where there's going to be a light rail line showing up in 15 years or whatever it is, but there could be some sort of transit type improvement that may not even be 15-minute all-day service, but it could be an improvement over what's there today that we'd like to be able to reflect in this plan, so you could share that.
Yes, and conversely for that community to say, oh, look, I am in UTA's radar. I'm just not maybe at this immediate need, but they are looking at my community. I think that will go a long way as well. So thank you.
At the start of your presentation, you mentioned several different kinds of plans that are being made throughout the agency. Are you suggesting doing away with those plans?
No, not at all.
Or are you really suggesting we're going to work really hard at integrating and coordinating all of those plans?
Exactly, the second thing you said.
Okay.
Integration and coordination. So yes, as I mentioned, we have experts throughout the agency who are working on their planning processes, and we are not looking to take that over or give them advice about what the right thing to do is. But what we want to see is for the plans that are happening over here, coordinate with the plans that are happening over here, because as we know, what you do over here impacts what happens over here.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much. Very good program.
I just also wanted to point out that this is all going to be done in-house, so we're not going to go out and hire anybody. We have the expertise in-house to perform all this work.
Can I just add, one of the things that we've been questioning, and I know this has been brought up, is the idea of the fifth quarters coming out. And I think this will help us sort of define what we really believe should be where the fifth quarters go on that. And I think that will help in how that can grow and what the vision could be as well. I think that's important to us versus having some input and having some analysis behind what we believe will work, not
The
just
other
the
side of
desire.
that is it shows that we're thinking about how to spend that money so that when we go to the counties, we can say to them, here's what we're planning to do, rather than them saying, we have no idea what you're going to do with this money.
Or this is what we want, and it's not
Right.
really going to be operable
Right.
or of a very efficient
So
system.
it gives
for
us a mechanism to really coordinate with the counties as well.
Right, so that 5 to 10 years, I think, is going to be important to take a look at as well.
Carolyn, one of the thoughts I had, and I don't know the mechanism, but as this plan gets evolved, it would, and the smaller plans will still take place. I think there ought to be a process where the smaller plans, you know, if it's other than where do I put my desk or something like that, ought to have a process where it comes back to the board and then gets adopted into the long-range plan. Just because that way, if there's because occasionally I hear of a plan, and it's not like egregious, but I'll hear of a plan that says, well, here's what we're planning to do, and I'm like, well, I've never heard that, and you know, I've only been here a year, so I don't expect, but it would be nice to have some kind of process where you say, here's what we're planning to do, and this is how it fits into the long-range plan, and then have some kind of formal adoption to that sort of integration.
Yeah, and I think
after the thing's complete.
I think that's important, but I mean, right now, as you're realizing as some of the funding applications are going out, is there's ideas also by entities that aren't UTA about where transit should go, and money grants being requested for those types of funding, and we may not even have that in a plan. So it's sort of trying to get those efforts all going and being more proactive in where these agencies should be requesting grant funding for, particularly if we're going to be the operator of those services. So I do think that's it. I do think on the strategic plan for us, it does. I do think if we're able to update the strategic plan before mid-year, that would actually help with the visioning of where they're going to go further, because they're in the middle of collecting data. So I think that then will help them move forward into sort of how they move forward in the design of the plan.
I would like to say one other thing that I think could be of an added benefit of overall plan is that when we go to cities and we talk about their land use and their zoning and other elements that they could be preparing for long term, I think it's really, really beneficial for us to have something that is fully integrated into all the aspects of it, and not just, well, theoretically you should consider this, but now we have theoretically you should consider this, and here's why.
Right.
So thank you.
And the last thing is that, we did mention that, we're going to try to update it every 4 years. It does work really well with the RTP, but we also have to realize that it can be somewhat living document as you think about all the changes just in the last 2 years we've had. We'll have to constantly sort of be taking a look at those things as well.
Mary or Alex, anything else? Okay. Well, thank you. We'll look forward to it, and good luck with that. And
Thanks for your time.
Certainly be happy to help in whatever way we can. I think with that, unless I'm missing something, Annette, we are to our beloved other business, which is our next meeting on January the 22nd. With that, I would entertain a motion for, the closed session, on the back side. Here I thought we were all done.
I move that we adjourn into a closed session.
I think it's recess, right?
Recess into a closed session.
Or go to close.
Yeah, a motion to go into closed session and announce the reasons for closed session.
Yeah, so the reasons, sorry, I'm the loose cannon here, is a strategy session to discuss collective bargaining and also discussion and deployment of security personnel devices or systems.
With that, I'll second the motion.
And we just note that we'll be in the engineer cabin conference room. With that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes, and so we'll take ourselves to our closed session. Thank you.